I'm joined now by Justin Wolfers, a professor of economic and public policy at the University of Michigan and host of the Think Like an Economist podcast. Wolfers co-wrote Principles of Economics, a textbook built around the idea that every decision is an economic decision. Also joining me, Steve Bennett, a producer for The Rachel Maddow Show on MSNBC and MSNBC political commentator and the author of the book Ministry of Truth, Democracy, Reality, and the Republicans' War on the Recent Past. Welcome to both of you. And Steve, I have to say, you do think like an economist on things like this. So I want to start with you on this because it's a political trick. It's economics in nature, but it's a political trick that's been used, and it's been used with effect because Republicans keep on coming on TV and telling you that they've saved us from a massive tax increase and it's not going to cost us anything.
Yeah, right. I love that analogy you're using before at the beginning of the segment. You're talking about the car lease, because I was thinking, if you went to your wife and said, guess what? Car payments are free now. Your wife would look at you like you were nuts. Right. And she would be right, because that's how math works. It's how arithmetic works. And so the fact that Republicans are playing this game is so ridiculous, but they feel like it's necessary because they realize, at least at some level, that this big mega bill is going to add trillions to the debt in the coming decades, in the coming years. And so with that in mind, they have a real political problem. This is supposed to be the deficit reduction party, the fiscal responsibility party. But of course, that's ridiculous given the fact that their record shows the opposite, and they're making it worse with this package. And so in the coming years, when we see the deficits soar, which is inevitably going to happen, we'll have to come back and return to this moment and realize that this current policy baseline is complete garbage.
Justin, let me ask you about this, because there are different views on the deficit, right? There's some orthodoxy that says deficits are always bad and that you should run the government like you run your household budget, which is not really accurate because you have a limited working span in your own life and the government doesn't. There are others who think there's no danger to deficits at all. You should run them up as much as you like. And the truth is somewhere probably in the middle. But for Republicans who believe that deficits are bad, they almost had to do this for their own selves to convince their constituents and themselves that we're not really running up the deficit so that wealthy people can get tax cuts.
Mate, this idea that Republicans are fiscally conservative and concerned about the deficit does cause me to chuckle a little bit. You see, if you'd been in this country maybe, 100 years ago, that might be right. But let's go back through the last 50 years of American economic history. Reagan came to power, promised big tax cuts, delivered them, promised they would pay for themselves. He blew out the budget. George W. Bush came to power, delivered big tax cuts, promised they'd pay for themselves, blew out the deficit. Donald Trump in 2017 came to power, promised big tax cuts, delivered them, promised that they would pay for themselves, blew out the budget. There has not been a fiscally conservative Republican in my lifetime. Right. If what you care about, and not everyone does, there are deep debates, I'm going to leave that up to viewers, but if what you care about, if you are a fiscal conservative, then you are not a Republican. And it's not, you're not a Republican anymore. This is not a post-Trump thing. This is the last 50 years.
Steve, there are a couple of tricks that were involved in this budget. The other one was something called dynamic scoring. There's also another thing that sort of projects how much growth will come out of a fiscal bill. Again, the White House was at odds with most economists across the board because they had this attitude that this bill, whether you want to call it animal spirits or whatever, it'll somehow unleash economic prosperity in such a way that we will grow ourselves out of these deficits. Again, it's debatable whether that's true, but it's not knowable at the moment. And most people who analyzed this bill said there's nothing about this bill that actually says that's going to happen.
Right. The White House and the Treasury Department have said repeatedly in recent months that growth is the key, that all we have to do is pass these tax cuts, direct all these additional capital to the wealthy and big corporations, and then things will trickle down, the economy will grow, and it'll take care of itself. But that's where Justin's point that he was just talking about becomes so important. We know that's not true. It's not a matter of theory. It's a matter of fact. We know this is not true because they've tried this repeatedly for a half century. And growth has never come. I mean, yes, there might be a slight increase from GDP from 1 year or 1 quarter from here or there. But at the same time, when you look at this in the macro sense, in terms of the long-term impact, the idea that tax cuts can pay for themselves through growth has been discredited. It has been tried, it has been tested, it has been analyzed, and it has been discredited as false. It just does not work. And yet here we are having this very familiar conversation because Republicans refuse to believe the evidence. They've refused to believe the fact that we've seen this before and it's always failed.
Yeah, in fact, another thing that's not happened in your lifetime, Justin, is trickle-down economics, right? It was a concept, and as Steve says, it's been tried very specifically. It was tried in the state of Kansas. It's been tried at a federal level. This idea that if people with lots of money have, save more money on their taxes or have more money, it will work its way down into the economy. The interesting thing is we're cutting SNAP and we're cutting Medicaid. At that point, if you're earning an amount of money that qualifies you for SNAP or Medicaid, 100% of anything you get goes into the economy. You're not investing it in some multinational hedge fund or something of that nature. We know the opposite is not necessarily true.
Yeah, so let me steelman that first. The Republican case here is that if I get to keep more of any dollar that I earn, then I'll go and earn more dollars. Fair enough. Who do you think is most likely to be responsive to that? A rich guy who doesn't actually need any more dollars? Or a working class American for whom those extra dollars could really enhance their quality of life? So if you believe the underlying theory, and I think it's a little bit true, it actually says that what we want to do is enhance the work incentives for working and middle class Americans, not for the very rich. Let me just come back to the thing that how this all affects fiscal policy and the debt.
In a whirlwind of economic intrigue and political maneuvering, former President Donald Trump has once again thrust tariffs into the spotlight, creating a storm of speculation and uncertainty that could ripple across global markets. A recent transcript reveals a cryptic yet high-stakes discussion about Trump's fixation on July 4th as a symbolic date for a potential tariff-related move, alongside the looming July 9th deadline, when the current tariff freeze is set to expire. This tantalizing snippet of conversation unveils a complex web of policy ambiguity, market volatility, and Trump's characteristic unpredictability, leaving analysts, investors, and everyday Americans on edge. The transcript begins with a nod to Trump's apparent obsession with July 4th, a date steeped in American symbolism. Why did he want to sign it on Independence Day? Was it a patriotic gesture, a calculated political stunt, or something else entirely? The speaker hints at a deeper motive, suggesting that the real significance might lie in the July 9th expiration of the tariff freeze, a deadline that could unleash economic chaos. Trump's response, when pressed directly, is maddeningly vague. Maybe I'll extend it. Maybe I'll freeze it. Maybe I won't. Maybe I will. This non-committal stance is classic Trump, keeping everyone guessing while holding the reins of power tightly in his hands. The stakes couldn't be higher. The last time the tariff freeze expired, it sent shockwaves through the stock and bond markets, with the U.S. dollar taking a hit. The transcript underscores the chaos that ensued, painting a vivid picture of markets in disarray and investors scrambling to make sense of the fallout. Trump's tariff policies, often described as erratic, have a proven track record of disrupting financial stability. The uncertainty surrounding his next move, whether to extend a freeze, let it lapse, or impose new tariffs, has created a palpable sense of dread. Will he double down on protectionism, or is this all a bluff to keep adversaries off balance? What makes this moment particularly gripping is the broader political context. Trump's tariff strategy isn't just about trade. It's a chess game with profound political implications. By dangling the possibility of extending or lifting the freeze, he's signaling his ability to control the narrative, sway markets, and flex his influence on the global stage. The transcript hints at a particularly confusing policy, but for Trump, confusion may be the point, a tactic to keep opponents guessing while rallying his base with promises of economic nationalism. Yet, the risks are undeniable. A misstep could exacerbate the dollar's decline, spook investors, and deepen economic uncertainty at a time when stability is sorely needed as July 9th approaches. The world watches with bated breath. Will Trump's next move stabilize markets or plunge them into further chaos? The transcript leaves us with more questions than answers, but one thing is clear. Trump's tariff saga is far from over, and its political and economic fallout will be dramatic. For the latest insights and reactions to this unfolding drama, subscribe to Jolt News Reaction on YouTube, where we break down the headlines and dive deep into the stories shaping our world. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now.